Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to help you cut through all that noise, that information overload, and find the insights that really matter for navigating life's challenges with, well, a bit more clarity and calm. You know that feeling, right? That constant background hum of worry. So many decisions, endless tasks, always wondering about what's next. It's something we all feel, but it can be genuinely draining. Leads to fatigue, makes it hard to think straight, hard to innovate, hard to just be. Today, we're doing a really fascinating deep dive into some timeless principles. These are observations, really, drawn from loads of human experience, all designed to help you not just manage worry, but maybe even conquer it. Build some real resilience. Think of this as your shortcut to getting well informed on managing that mental load, finding a bit more peace of mind. We're going to unpack some fundamental, actionable strategies, things that could genuinely change how you handle pressure, both at work and, in life generally. And guiding us through this is Prof. Mo Imam. Your insights into human behavior and these kinds of wisdom traditions are just invaluable. Welcome, Prof. Mo Imam. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And you're absolutely right. This topic of worry, it touches everyone, doesn't it? Doesn't matter what job you do, what industry, where you are in life. Prof. Mo Imam. What we're aiming for today really is to take these profound observations, these experiences, and distill them down into something practical, actionable wisdom, if you like, Prof. Mo Imam, making ideas that might seem complex actually quite accessible and hopefully profoundly impactful for you, our listener.
Fantastic. So, Professor, let's start right there. Many of us, when we hit a really difficult situation or things feel uncertain, we just freeze. We get paralyzed by worry. It feels like quicksand, doesn't it? You can't move forward, even when staying still is the worst thing you can do. What's really going on there? What's at the absolute heart of that struggle? Prof. Mo Imam. Well, what's truly fascinating, and perhaps a bit overlooked sometimes, is an observation made by Dean Herbert E. Hawks. He was at Columbia College for years, helped countless students through their anxieties, Prof. Mo Imam. And he came to a rather striking conclusion. He said, confusion is the chief cause of worry.
Just think about that for a moment. Prof. Mo Imam, he reckoned about half of our worries don't actually stem from how difficult the problem is in itself. No. They come from trying to make decisions, trying to navigate these challenges without enough clear information. Without the facts. Prof. Mo Imam. It's a bit like, trying to solve a really complex maths equation, but you don't have all the variables properly defined. Or driving in thick fog without a map. Prof. Mo Imam. Precisely. You simply lack the necessary clarity, that sort of mental scaffolding you need to move forward effectively. And that lack of clarity, well, it breeds profound anxiety. Prof. Mo Imam. Your mind starts racing, doesn't it? Trying to fill in the blanks, often imagining the worst possible outcomes. You get stuck in this endless internal loop of what if, what if. That makes so much sense. It's the not knowing, the uncertainty that creates all that mental noise and stops you deciding. So, okay, the first logical step has to be getting out of that fog, shedding some light on the situation, whatever it is. But how do you do that properly when your emotions are already, cranked up high? Prof. Mo Imam. Without facts, you're just, as the saying goes, stewing around in confusion. Our worries tend to feast on vague fears, on assumptions. Prof. Mo Imam, so the antidote. It's rigorous, objective information gathering. Think about Thomas Edison, for instance. Quite a remarkable example. Prof. Mo Imam. When he passed away, they found something like 2,500 notebooks, each one meticulously filled with facts directly related to the problems he was trying to solve with his inventions, 2,500. Wow. Prof. Mo Imam. Indeed, it wasn't just, a quirky habit. It was a core strategy, a method. This diligent, almost obsessive approach meant he always had a really solid, well-informed foundation for his decisions. Prof. Mo Imam, it stopped him wasting precious time and energy on, well, ill-conceived ideas or just worrying about things unnecessarily. Prof. Mo Imam. For us, say, in our professional lives, this means we need to go beyond just gut feelings or what someone told us once. Prof. Mo Imam. It's about digging into the reports, asking those difficult, maybe uncomfortable questions, talking to everyone involved, checking the data, gathering information impartially, comprehensively. Prof. Mo Imam. You need to let the reality of the situation, the actual objective data, emerge before you start layering your emotional interpretations or fears onto it. Prof. Mo Imam. And that objectivity is absolutely paramount because it replaces that vague, consuming anxiety with something concrete. Actionable knowledge. You move from guesswork to truth. Okay, objectivity sounds simple, but let's be honest, even when we try to gather facts, our own fears or biases can creep in, can't they? We might unconsciously look for stuff that confirms what we're already worried about, sort of digging the hole deeper without realizing it. How do we stay impartial when we're already feeling scared? And then, even if we do get all the facts, all that data, it can feel like this huge mountain of information, overwhelming in a new way. What's the next step to actually make sense of it all, to get clarity? Prof. Mo Imam. You've put your finger on a critical human tendency there. Confirmation bias is very real. To fight it, you have to deliberately, consciously seek out dissenting views. Prof. Imam. Look for the data that disproves your initial hunch. Talk to people with different perspectives, even the ones that challenge your comfortable story. It requires a certain intellectual discipline, humility even. Prof. Imam. And then once you have that robust collection of facts, well, the most effective method I'd suggest is, perhaps surprisingly, quite simple, but profoundly powerful. Prof. Imam. Write them down. Just write them down. Prof. Imam. Just write them down. Simply articulating the problem, all the relevant details, all those variables you've gathered, putting them down on paper. It's incredibly potent. Prof. Imam. Charles Kettering, the brilliant engineer and inventor, he put it beautifully. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. I like that. Prof. Imam. And it's not just a clever phrase, it's a deep psychological insight. It takes the problem out of that abstract, anxious internal chatter, that chaotic whirlwind inside our heads, and turns it into something concrete, manageable. Prof. Imam. This act of externalizing it doesn't just clarify things, it actually sort of defangs the emotional static. It gives you a tangible framework for rational thought. Prof. Imam. It lets your mind spot patterns, connections, potential solutions that were just lost in the noise before. You can literally see the problem from a distance, instead of being trapped right inside it. Prof. Imam. Putting pen to paper or typing it out, it creates this mental distance that really fosters objectivity. So the writing isn't just about organizing thoughts. It's like an emotional circuit breaker. It sounds almost too simple, maybe,
Yeah.
but that's where the shift happens, from being stuck to seeing a way forward. I know I often get stuck there myself, even with the information, just feeling overwhelmed, but getting it out of my head, yeah, that does make a difference. And that leads us to the absolute linchpin, doesn't it? The make or break moment in this whole thing. Because knowing is one thing, but actually doing something. Prof. Imam. Oh, it's truly indispensable. Absolutely critical. All the fact-finding, all the analysis in the world, it just amounts to, well, whistling in the wind without this third step. Prof. Imam.
Which is graph money, arrive at a decision, and then this is a crucial act on that decision. Prof. Imam.
The greatest insight, the most brilliant analysis just sits there, useless if it doesn't translate into committed action. Prof. Imam. You know, the paralysis of indecision is often far more damaging than making a choice that turns out to be less than perfect, because it keeps you stuck in the very confusion and worry you're trying to escape. Prof. Imam. Think about the case of Galen Litchfield. He was a highly successful American businessman, found himself in the Far East, Shanghai, during the Japanese invasion in 1942, a truly perilous time. Prof. Imam. He was facing a life-threatening situation over some hidden securities. If the Japanese found them, it could have meant certain death for him, maybe his family too. Immense pressure. Prof. Imam. But instead of panicking, instead of despairing, he very systematically sat down. He wrote out 4 possible courses of action, and for each one, he meticulously detailed the probable consequences. Prof. Imam. His decision, which came out of this calm analysis, was simply to go to the office as usual, despite the huge, terrifying risk. Prof. Imam. And then here's the really profound bit. He then dismissed absolutely all responsibility and care about the outcome. He fully committed to his chosen path. Prof. Imam. This calculated act, it led to an almost immediate sense of profound relief, a palpable lightness. It allowed him to function, even sleep, under that extreme duress. That's incredible. So it wasn't just making the decision, it was the commitment. The psychological letting go of second guessing once the choice was made, that's the bit so many of us struggle with. Those what ifs that just haunt you. Prof. Imam. Precisely. Exactly that. And that's where the wisdom of the philosopher William James is so relevant. He stated very wisely, when once a decision is reached and execution is the order of the day, dismiss absolutely all responsibility and care about the outcome. Prof. Imam. Now, this isn't a call for being reckless or, blind faith. Not at all. It's about fully committing your energy to a carefully considered path. Prof. Imam. It prevents that self-doubt, that anxiety, that endless rethinking from just eroding the mental and emotional energy you actually need for decisive action. Prof. Imam. The moment you make that decision and truly commit, a huge chunk of the worry, which thrives on uncertainty and indecision, it just evaporates. Poof. You've closed the loop. Prof. Imam. In Litchfield's case, about 6 weeks after he made that incredibly brave decision, the Japanese admiral who'd been scrutinizing him left Tokyo, and his worries, the real gnawing fears for his life, his business, they just ended. Prof. Mo Imam. This systematic method, facts, analysis, decisive, committed action, it didn't just save his life, it also contributed significantly to his later success in business, Prof. Mo Imam. It just shows the immense, almost paradoxical value of confronting worry head-on with a structured, rational approach. You replace that open loop of indecision with the closed loop of purposeful action, and that frees up so much cognitive space. Closing the loop. I like that. It's so powerful, that idea of committed action leading to immediate relief, and it links perfectly to another concept, doesn't it? This idea of day-tight compartments. It sounds almost poetic, like a kind of philosophical engineering for your mind. What does that actually mean for us day to day, especially for professionals juggling so many things, feeling stretched across past, present, future? Prof. Mo Imam. It is indeed a beautiful and profoundly practical philosophy. It comes from Sir William Osler, the renowned physician, one of the founders of Johns Hopkins Hospital. Prof. Mo Imam. He taught this idea after reading a very short, just 21-word excerpt that deeply affected him. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Prof. Mo Imam. He took that to heart, and he likened human life to a great ocean liner. He urged us to control the machinery of our minds by, effectively, shutting off the dead yesterdays, all the regrets, mistakes, mischances, Prof. Mo Imam, and also shutting off the unborn tomorrows, all the anxieties, the predictions, the plans for the future, Prof. Mo Imam. The core message is really about focusing all your energy, all your attention, your mental resources purely on today, right now, Prof. Mo Imam. It's about consciously stopping the past regrets or the future's unknown anxieties from leaking into and overwhelming the present moment, because the present is the only time we actually have any power over. Prof. Mo Imam. Think of it like building mental bulkheads on a ship. You stop one compartment, flooding the rest. Mental bulkheads. That's such a vivid image. But it implies real discipline, doesn't it? Because for many of us, the weight of past mistakes or future worries feels almost impossible to shut off. How did people actually live this? What did it look like in practice for those who manage this kind of discipline focus? Prof. Mo Imam. Well, we can see this philosophy in action in some truly remarkable figures from history. Admiral Ernest J. King, for instance. He directed the entire U.S. Navy during World War II. Imagine the pressure. Prof. Mo Imam. He embodied this. He stated, very pragmatically, that he simply could not bring up a ship that had already sunk, nor could he stop one from being sunk in the past. It was done. Prof. Mo Imam. Therefore, he focused relentlessly on tomorrow's problem, which for him meant the immediate actionable task at hand. The next battle, the next strategy, not fretting about yesterday's stuff, which was utterly beyond his control. Prof. Mo Imam. He understood that dwelling on the unchangeable was just counterproductive. It sapped energy he desperately needed, a luxury he couldn't afford. Prof. Mo Imam. Similarly, Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times during the war years, he adopted a personal motto: one step enough for me. One step enough for me. Prof. Mo Imam.
Yeah.
To banish his own profound worries during that incredibly difficult time, rather than being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the global conflict or the future of his newspaper, he focused on the next edition, the next news cycle, the immediate challenge right in front of him. Prof. Mo Imam. Now, this disciplined approach, it's not about avoiding planning or strategy altogether, not at all. Rather, it's about cultivating good thinking. Thinking that deals with actual causes and effects that leads to constructive plans. Prof. Mo Imam. It's the opposite of succumbing to that debilitating tension, the mental breakdowns, the decision paralysis that comes from excessive, vague anxiety about things you can't immediately influence. Prof. Mo Imam. It's about effective mental compartmentalization, allowing you to bring your full, undivided focus to the task at hand and execute it with clarity, right? So it's about channeling your focus, directing your mental energy, not ignoring the past or future, but not letting them constantly derail the present moment. That's a really key distinction. Now, there's this other technique, which sounds really counterintuitive, but apparently incredibly powerful for tackling worry. It's sometimes called a magic formula. Sounds almost too good to be true, but it seems to have genuinely liberated people. Can you tell us about that? Prof. Mo Imam.
Yes, this truly can be a game changer for many. It comes from Willis H. Carrier, the brilliant engineer who pioneered modern air conditioning. He faced enormous financial and engineering anxieties early in his career. This method helped him overcome them. Prof. Mo Imam. It's a three-step process. Quite distinct steps, but they work together. First, you ask yourself with absolute brutal honesty, what is the worst that can possibly happen in this situation? Prof. Mo Imam. You really have to confront your deepest fear head-on. Let your imagination go there to the absolute worst outcome. Don't hold back. Prof. Mo Imam. Second, and this is where the counterintuitive power really lies, you prepare yourself to accept that worst-case scenario. If it becomes necessary, accept it, just like that. Prof. Mo Imam. Mentally, yes. emotionally, even practically perhaps. This isn't about resigning yourself to failure or giving up hope.
Not at all. It's about mentally coming to terms with the absolute bottom line. Prof Mo Imam, you throw a line under it, acknowledge it as a possibility you could survive. Prof Mo Imam. And then thirdly, once you've truly made that acceptance, once you've mentally settled the absolute worst, you then calmly devote all your time and energy to improving upon that worst case scenario, building upwards from that rock bottom you've accepted. Prof Mo Imam. The Chinese philosopher Lin Yutang noted this process provides a release of energy, and it really does. Prof Mo Imam. When you genuinely accept the worst, you suddenly realize you have nothing more to lose, and that automatically means you have everything to gain. The fear, which drains so much energy, just dissipates, because its worst threat has been faced, acknowledged, and psychologically neutralized. That's such a strange paradox, isn't it? Facing the worst actually frees you up. It almost sounds like a psychological trick, but clearly it works. Can you give us an example? Someone who actually went through this. Prof Mo Imam, certainly. There's the story of a New York oil dealer. He found himself being blackmailed by some of his drivers over some shady dealings. The potential publicity would have utterly ruined his family business, his reputation, everything. Prof Mo Imam, he was consumed by worry, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep for days. His health was collapsing, literally sick with anxiety. Prof Mo Imam. Then he applied Carrier's formula. He forced himself to face the absolute worst, total ruin of the business, public shame, financial disaster. Prof Mo Imam. Once he mentally accepted that possibility, once he said to himself, okay, if that happens, I'll deal with it, I'll start over, something profound shifted psychologically. Prof Mo Imam, he was released from the emotional turmoil of constantly fighting against that worst outcome. His mind became clear, calm, sharp. Prof Mo Imam. And then he could calmly, rationally focus on solutions. He made some further investments, put in new checks, confronted the blackmailers with a newfound calm resolve. Prof Mo Imam. And not only did he avoid ruin, he actually turned a significant profit from the very situation that had nearly destroyed him. His mind, freed from the grip of fear, could suddenly see opportunities. Wow. Prof Mo Imam. Or consider a perhaps more extreme case. A man told by doctors he only had weeks to live due to a serious illness. Instead of just despairing, he did something remarkable. He bought a casket, put it on a ship, and took it with him on a round-the-world trip. He took his casket on a world trip. Prof Mo Imam. He did. By literally accepting his impending death, embracing the absolute worst, he paradoxically found a new vitality. He relaxed. He stopped fighting his fate. And guess what? He lived for many more years, far beyond the doctor's predictions. Prof Mo Imam. It's a powerful testament, isn't it? When we genuinely accept the worst outcome, the huge emotional burden of resisting that possibility just lifts. It allows our minds to think clearly, constructively, to find opportunities previously hidden by fear. Prof Mo Imam. The energy that was tied up in dread is suddenly liberated for creative problem solving, for appreciating the present. It's a profound surrender that actually leads to empowerment. That's truly remarkable, how facing the inevitable, accepting it, can be so liberating. Which leads nicely to the next point, doesn't it? It seems like a really crucial part of finding peace of mind, building resilience, is learning to accept what simply cannot be changed, recognizing the limits of our control. Because so much struggle comes from fighting reality, railing against what is. Prof Mo Imam, absolutely. This is a profound truth and perhaps one of the most challenging to truly embrace, especially, in a world that often tells us to fight for control over everything. Prof Mo Imam, William James, again, offered such sage advice here. He said, be willing to have it so. Acceptance of what has happened is the first step to overcoming the consequences of any misfortune. Prof Mo Imam. It's about embracing reality, however harsh, however painful it might be, rather than wasting futile energy resisting it. Prof Mo Imam. Now, this doesn't mean being passive or just giving up. It means accepting the fact of what's happened so you can then constructively deal with the consequences. Prof Mo Imam, Elizabeth Conley's experience during World War II, illustrates this painful but ultimately liberating truth so well. Her beloved nephew was tragically killed in action. Prof Mo Imam, she was utterly devastated. Prostrate with grief, bitterness, deep resentment, she neglected her work, her friends, herself. She simply couldn't accept this devastating loss. Prof Mo Imam. But then she happened to reread a letter her nephew had written years earlier when her own mother had died, and in it he'd urged her to carry on and take whatever comes like a man. Prof Mo Imam. Those words from him resonated so deeply. She realized his spirit was one of acceptance, of moving forward. Prof Mo Imam. So she went back to her work. She consciously decided to stop being bitter. She poured her mind and strength into helping others, took new classes, made new friends. Prof Mo Imam. She literally made peace with life, as she put it, and found herself living a fuller, more complete, more meaningful life than she'd ever known before, all by accepting the inevitable and choosing to carry on with renewed purpose. Prof Mo Imam. She shifted from being a victim of circumstance to an active participant in her own healing, her own growth, finding new meaning. So it's that shift from resistance to acceptance that unlocks the energy. It's not giving up, like you said, but it's a strategic shift. Reallocating your mental and emotional resources. Prof Mo Imam, precisely, that's an excellent way to put it. Even historical figures like King George V or the philosopher Schopenhauer, they stress the importance of resignation, not as defeat, but as a pragmatic path, a route to inner peace and fortitude. Prof Mo Imam. Think of Booth Tarkington, the celebrated American author. He faced severe challenges later in life, blindness, multiple painful operations. Yet he found immense strength and peace by accepting his situation. Prof Mo Imam. He actually chose a hospital ward over a private room, specifically to be with others who were suffering, to share in that human experience. And he openly marveled at the advances in medical science, even amidst his own personal anguish. Prof Mo Imam. This profound acceptance allowed him to say, quite remarkably, I would not exchange this experience for a happier one, because it taught him the true meaning of acceptance. It revealed the depth of his own inner strength, his resilience. Wow, that's quite something. Prof Mo Imam, indeed. And the analogy of trees in a sleet storm is so apt, isn't it? The rigid trees, the ones that resist the heavy burden of ice, they often snap, they break under the strain. Prof Mo Imam. Whereas the evergreens, the spruce, the pine, they know how to bend gracefully. They allow the ice to coat their branches without shattering them. And so they survive the storm. Prof Mo Imam. This principle, cooperating with the inevitable, it frees up an immense amount of mental and emotional energy, energy that would otherwise be just consumed by futile struggle against forces beyond our control. Prof Mo Imam. It's about adapting to the currents of life rather than constantly fighting them. It lets you conserve your strength for what you can influence. You release the energy spent on internal rebellion and redirect it towards growth, towards new possibilities, bending instead of breaking. That image really speaks. Makes you realize how much internal resistance we create. Okay, let's shift slightly. We often hear stress affects health, but how direct, how severe is the physical impact of worry? Is it just a feeling, a kind of vague discomfort, or does it actually do tangible damage to our bodies? Because when you're really consumed by it, it feels like much more than just an emotion. Prof Mo Imam, it's alarmingly direct, and the physical toll can be profoundly severe, far beyond just feeling stressed. Dr. Alexis Carrel, the Nobel Prize-winning surgeon, he famously declared, "Businessmen who do not know how to fight worry die young." Die young, that's strong. Prof Mo Imam. It is strong, but it wasn't hyperbole. It was based on extensive clinical reality. Dr. O.F. Gobert, who is a chief physician for a major railway company, he noted that a staggering 70% of his patients presented with issues that stemmed directly from worry. Prof Mo Imam and the Mayo brothers, founders of the Mayo Clinic, they even stated that over half of all hospital beds are occupied by individuals suffering from nervous troubles. Yet often when you examine their actual nerves under a microscope, they appear perfectly healthy. Prof Mo Imam. It just highlights what Plato realized centuries ago. The greatest mistake physicians make is that they attempt to cure the body without attempting to cure the mind. The two are absolutely inextricably linked. Prof Mo Imam. Our mental state has a direct, measurable physiological impact. It influences everything, our hormones, our immune system. It's not just a feeling. It's a physical process unfolding in the body. That's such a stark reminder of the mind-body connection. It's not just feeling stress, it's actual physiological consequences. Are there historical examples that really drive this home? That direct link between intense worry and specific, almost immediate physical symptoms? Pro Mo Imam. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Consider General Grant. During the final days of the American Civil War, he was apparently almost half blind with the violent sick headache whilst relentlessly pursuing Lee's army. Prof Mo Imam. The immense burden of command, the weight of the nation's future, the tactical pressure was causing him profound physical distress. The moment he received Lee's surrender note, his headache vanished. Instantly. Prof Mo Imam. Instantly. It wasn't a conventional physical ailment. It was the immense, crushing burden of worry and tension causing the suffering. Removing that burden brought immediate physiological relief. Prof Mo Imam. Similarly, Henry Morgenthau Jr., who was Secretary of the Treasury under Roosevelt during the Depression of World War II, immense financial worries. He experienced severe dizziness, fainting spells, physical discomfort. His doctors confirmed it was pure anxiety, just anxiety causing fainting spells. Prof Mo Imam. Indeed. And worry can manifest in so many ways. Chronic issues like diabetes, heart trouble clinicians often call them first cousins of worry diseases because of the sustained physiological stress, Prof Mo Imam. But even acute problems, tooth decay, for instance. There's a recorded case of a patient developing 9 cavities in just 3 weeks of intense, sustained worry over his wife's severe illness. 9 cavities in 3 weeks. From worry, Prof Mo Imam. The stress hormones released by prolonged anxiety, they suppress the immune system, increase inflammation, alter body chemistry. It creates this cascade of negative effects throughout the body. Prof. Mo Imam. Even the film star Marilla Oberon, known for her beauty, she consciously avoided worrying specifically to protect her good looks, her main asset. She understood its corrosive effect. Prof. Mo Imam. So yes, it's clear. Prolonged, intense worry acts like a potent systemic poison. It breaks down the body just as it breaks down the mind. The toll, visible and invisible, is immense.
Okay, so if worry is that detrimental physically and mentally, what are the practical steps?
The actionable things we can do to counteract it build resilience, especially when we feel trapped by the very circumstances causing the worry. Prof. Mo Imam. Well, one of the most powerful remedies, and often rather overlooked because it seems so simple, is profoundly effective. Keep busy. Keep busy. That sounds almost too simple. Prof. Mo Imam. It does, but as the poet Tennyson put it, I must lose myself in action lest I wither in despair. When we are fully absorbed in constructive, meaningful activity, our minds simply have less room for anxiety, less mental bandwidth to ruminate on fears and what-ifs. Prof. Mo Imam. The act of doing, engaging our intellect, our hands, it's a powerful cognitive redirection. It actively pushes the worry out. Prof. Mo Imam. Think of Marion J. Douglas. He suffered the unimaginable tragedy of losing 2 young daughters. He found profound relief from his shattered nerves, his overwhelming grief, by completely immersing himself, caring for his remaining son, taking on new community responsibilities. Prof. Mo Imam. Longfellow the poet after his wife's horrific death by fire. He channeled his immense grief into translating Dante's Divine Comedy, focusing intensely on his 3 small children. He explicitly said that sustained, focused work literally saved him from insanity. Prof. Mo Imam. Admiral Byrd, isolated for 5 months in the Antarctic darkness, soul-crushing conditions, he consciously kept busy scientific observations, fixing equipment, writing purely to preserve his sanity, to stop his mind deteriorating. Prof. Mo Imam, Dr. Richard C. Cabot, a Harvard professor, he regarded meaningful work as one of the best cures for what he called the trembling palsy of the soul. It's an active remedy, reclaims mental territory, rechannels destructive energy into something productive. It's not about pointless busy work, mind you, but purposeful engagement. That's a powerful case for the therapeutic value of focused work. Purposeful action, not just being occupied. But what about the fatigue that often comes with worry? Especially for those of us in sedentary jobs, we're not physically exhausted, but we feel completely drained. How do we tackle that insidious, energy-sapping fatigue? Prof. Mo Imam. That's a crucial point. And it often catches people out because it feels like physical exhaustion. But as you say, for sedentary workers, much of that fatigue isn't physical at all. It's profoundly psychological in origin. Prof. Mo Imam, Dr. J. Hadfield, a distinguished British psychiatrist, he argued that the greater part of the fatigue from which we suffer is of mental origin. In fact, exhaustion of purely physical origin is rare. Prof. Mo Imam. Dr. A. Brill went even further. He stated, 100% of the fatigue of the sedentary worker in good health is due to psychological factors. 100%. Prof. Mo Imam. 100% in his view. The culprits. Typically things like boredom, resentment, anxiety, feeling like what you're doing is pointless. These mental states create constant low-level tension in our bodies, in our minds, silently consuming vast amounts of nervous energy. Prof. Mo Imam. And the antidote to this kind of psychological fatigue, perhaps surprisingly, it's to relax, to consciously release that tension. You're essentially fighting yourself, and that's exhausting. But how do you actually relax? Especially when your mind is racing, you feel overwhelmed, or you're just stuck at a desk all day feeling like you can't switch off. Easier said than done, surely. Prof. Mo Imam. You're quite right. It takes conscious effort. Specific techniques. The key is often to start with your muscles. Mental tension almost always translates into muscle tension, creating this draining feedback loop. Prof. Mo Imam. Dr. Edmund Jacobson's research at the University of Chicago suggested something rather remarkable. He found that if you can learn to fully relax the muscles of your eyes, you can effectively forget all your troubles. Relax your eyes and forget your troubles. Prof. Mo Imam, well, his reasoning was that the eyes, despite their small size, consume about a quarter of the body's total nervous energy, so relaxing them has a disproportionately large calming effect. Prof. Mo Imam. Practical techniques. Consciously releasing tension throughout your body, maybe limb by limb. Imagining yourself going completely limp as a sock. That was a technique a former circus clown taught the novelist Vicky Baum. Helped her fight fatigue from intense writing by just consciously slumping at her desk for moments. Prof. Mo Imam. Or simply watch a cat relax. Completely limp. Utterly devoid of tension. They're masters of letting go. Prof. Mo Imam. Dale Carnegie, the great soprano, she would sit with a completely limp jaw before performances. To prevent nervousness, fatigue, she understood that direct link between muscle tension and mental state, Prof. Mo Imam, and regularly taking short rests, even just 5-minute naps or periods of conscious relaxation, deep breathing. John D. Rockefeller did this throughout his incredibly demanding career. It can significantly restore energy, prevent that psychological fatigue building up. Prof. Mo Imam. It's about building a habit of conscious micro-relaxation throughout the day, actively disengaging the tension rather than waiting until you're completely burnt out. Micro-relaxation, I love that. It feels achievable for busy professionals. Not grand gestures, but these intentional little moments. Okay, another big source of worry, replaying the past. Mistakes, losses, that mental sawing sawdust idea. We spend so much energy on what's done, what can't be changed. How do we break free from that? Redirect energy more constructively. Prof. Mo Imam, the principle is simple, but oh, so profound. Don't try to saw sawdust. You literally cannot change what's already happened. Just like you can't saw wood into more sawdust once it's already sawdust. The past is fixed, immutable, Prof. Mo Imam. Dwelling on it, replaying scenarios, reliving regrets, wishing things were different. It is a sheer monumental waste of precious mental and emotional energy. Energy that could be used to build something new, right now, or plan for the future. Pro Mo Imam. It's like constantly checking a broken clock. It'll never show the right time, and it distracts you from finding one that works. Pro Mo Imam. Connie Mack, the legendary baseball manager, he learned this the hard way over his long career. He said he used to worry constantly about lost games, bad decisions, but eventually he realized you can't grind any grain with water that has already gone down the creek. Water under the bridge, essentially. Prof. Mo Imam. Exactly. His focus shifted entirely to the next game, the next play, the next opportunity, because that was where his energy could actually make a difference. So accept what's done, learn the lesson, truly move on, instead of letting it just eat away at you. But how do you genuinely move on when the past feels so heavy, so tied up with who you are or your professional story? Prof. Mo Imam, precisely. Take Jack Dempsey, the heavyweight boxing champion. After he lost his title to Gene Tunney in that famous long count fight, it was a massive public blow, humiliating for a proud champion. Prof. Mo Imam. But he chose not to dwell on it, not to endlessly replay those final moments in his mind. Instead, he channeled his huge energy, his charisma, his competitive drive into new things, opening successful restaurants, promoting fights. Prof. Mo Imam, he famously said he actually had a better time, was happier after being champion than during it, simply because he chose not to cry over spilt milk. He recognized the defeat was finished, sawdust. His energy was better spent building a new chapter. Prof. Mo Imam. The only truly constructive way to engage with the past is this. Calmly analyze your mistakes. Extract the specific lessons you need to learn from them, lessons to inform your future actions, and then consciously, deliberately, definitively let them go. Prof. Mo Imam. This might involve, I don't know, a specific ritual, journaling out it to get it out of your system, talking it through with a trusted mentor, or just a mental ritual of closure. Prof. Mo Imam. But dwelling on the unchangeable, it only leads to wrinkles, ulcers, and a severe drain on your vital energy. It offers zero progress. Close those mental chapters so you can open new ones. Embrace the present with all your strength. Close the chapters. That's a great way to think about it. Now, shifting perspective again. It's quite striking, isn't it, Professor, how we often face major life crises quite bravely. A big professional setback, a personal tragedy. We somehow find the strength. But then it's the small things, the nagging annoyances, the beetles, as the metaphor goes, that can truly wear us down, sap our peace of mind. We fight giants but trip over pebbles. Why does that happen? Prof. Mo Imam. It is a profoundly astute observation. And it really highlights a peculiar quirk of human psychology, doesn't it? Our minds seem geared up to mobilize enormous resources when faced with large, immediate threats. Prof. Mo Imam. But they often get completely bogged down by incessant minor irritations. When the stakes are genuinely high, the adrenaline flows, our focus sharpens, and trivial things just vanish. Prof. Mo Imam. But in everyday life, when there isn't some grand battle to fight, the small things can get magnified way out of proportion. Prof. Mo Imam. Robert Moore, the man on the submarine under depth charge attack during the war. He realized in that moment of facing imminent death the sheer absurdity of his previous worries, things like long hours at the bank or not owning his own home. In that existential crisis, the trifles just evaporated. Their true insignificance was revealed. Prof. Mo Imam, Admiral Byrd on his polar expedition. He similarly noted his crew fussed more over minor issues in that extreme cold and isolation, a burnt meal, a misplaced tool, than they did about genuine life-threatening dangers like frostbite or getting lost in a blizzard. Prof. Mo Imam. Judge Joseph Sabbath, after presiding over, I think it was 40,000 unhappy marriages, he concluded trivialities are at the bottom of most marital unhappiness. Prof. Mo Imam. It's these minor, constant irritations, the daily beetles that accumulate unnoticed. They become overwhelming. They lead to chronic stress, resentment, a profound erosion of our mental and emotional reserves. They're like thousands of tiny cuts just slowly bleeding you dry. That makes perfect sense. The accumulation is crushing. So how do we protect ourselves from these beetles? In a busy professional life, the small annoyances, endless emails, petty bureaucracy, minor clashes with colleagues, they really can pile up into a massive mental burden. Prof. Mo Imam. It often requires a conscious, deliberate shift in emphasis, a change in perspective, a recalibration of what truly matters moment to moment. Prof. Mo Imam. Eleanor Roosevelt, for instance. A woman with immense public responsibilities, she learned to just shrug off poorly prepared meals served by her cook. She acknowledged it simply wasn't worth the emotional energy, the turmoil to make a fuss about it. She saved her energy for bigger things. Prof. Mo Imam. Mrs. Carnegie, hosting a grand dinner party. She noticed the napkins didn't match, but she chose to ignore it. Prioritized her guests' enjoyment, the spirit of the evening, over a trivial imperfection that could have caused her considerable internal stress. Prof. Mo Imam. There's that ancient Roman legal maxim, de minimis non curat lex. The law does not concern itself with trifles, and it applies just as profoundly to our mental well-being. The law doesn't concern itself with trifles, nor should we, mentally. Prof. Mo Imam. It's about consciously deciding which battles are actually worth fighting inside your own head, and letting go of the rest. Homer Croy, the author, he even trained himself to find the rattling of his radiators rather pleasant, like a crackling fire. He just consciously changed his mental association with the sound, turned irritation into comfort. Prof. Mo Imam. It shows the power of reframing, doesn't it? Choosing your interpretation, your emotional response. Prof. Mo Imam. And that story of the ancient tree survived lightning storms for 400 years, only to be finally felled by an army of beetles. It's such a powerful metaphor, Prof. Mo Imam. It's the small, incessant worries, often dismissed as insignificant, that can, if we let them, gradually destroy our inner strength, our peace. We have to learn to spot our beetles, acknowledge them briefly perhaps, and then consciously put them back in their tiny, insignificant box. Refuse to let them consume our valuable mental real estate. Spot the beetles, put them in their box. I like that. It's about that perspective again. Now, another really practical tool to disarm worry, using the law of averages. How can we actually apply this statistical idea in everyday life? Especially when our minds love to catastrophize, imagine the absolute worst. Prof. Mo Imam. Well, so many of our deepest worries are actually based on highly improbable events, fears that cold, hard statistics simply don't support. As children, you might worry about, I don't know, being buried alive or struck by lightning, yet the actual chances are astronomically low. Prof. Mo Imam. Our minds, particularly when anxious or under pressure, they have this tendency to inflate the probability of negative, dramatic things happening, often fueled by sensationalist media or vivid anecdotal stories we hear. Prof. Mo Imam. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance market, they built their massive centuries-old business precisely on this human tendency to overestimate risk. They're essentially betting, based on statistics, that the disasters most people fear won't actually happen to the vast majority of their clients. Prof. Mo Imam. They call it insurance, but fundamentally it's built on a deep understanding and application of the law of averages. It's about leveraging data against our inflated emotional fears, bringing a sense of rational proportion back to our anxieties. So it's like doing an internal audit of our worries. Confronting the irrational fear with actual facts, forcing our emotional brain to listen to reason. Prof. Mo Imam, exactly that, yes. Take Jim Grant, the fruit car dispatcher mentioned earlier. He worried constantly about train wrecks, collapsing bridges under his cargo, developed severe stomach problems and ulcer from this perpetual unfounded anxiety. Prof. Mo Imam. Yet his company had an astonishing 5,000 to 1 safety record for his specific dispatches based on his own extensive experience. Prof. Mo Imam. By consciously examining the record, as he put it, by seeing the statistical improbability of his fears, by deliberately overriding his emotional forecasts with factual data, his stomach ulcer rooted in anxiety just vanished, just by looking at the stats. Prof. Mo Imam. The concrete evidence showed his fears were unfounded and his body responded to that shift in his mental state. Similarly, Frederick J. Malstedt, the soldier in the slit trench during the D-Day landings, bombs falling everywhere, immense primal fear. Prof. Mo Imam. But then, he rationally calculated the minuscule chance of a direct hit on his specific little trench. This rational assessment, a conscious application of probability, it allowed him to calm down significantly, reduce his anxiety. He even managed to sleep through parts of the terrifying bombardment. Prof. Mo Imam. This rational approach, championed by figures like Al Smith, who always urge people to examine the record before panicking, it helps us distinguish between genuine, calculable risks, things we need to plan for, and those statistically unfounded anxieties that just drain our energy, poison our peace of mind, and stop us functioning effectively. Prof. Mo Imam. It's about using logic to override fear, to see the world more as it actually is, not just as our anxieties painted. Okay, that's incredibly practical. Examine the record. Right, so today we have covered so much ground in this deep dive into tackling worry. We've looked at that systematic approach. Facts, analysis, decision, action. Crucial. We explored living in day-tight compartments, focusing on the present. That liberating magic formula of accepting the worst to free up energy, understanding worry's very real physical toll. And the antidotes. Keeping busy with purpose and learning true conscious relaxation, plus not sawing sawdust, letting go of the past. And finally, not letting the beetles of trifles get you down and using the law of averages to rationalize fears. Prof. Mo Imam. Indeed. And the thread weaving through all of these principles, as you summarized so well, is the immense, often underestimated power of our own mental attitude. Prof. Mo Imam. As the great Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wisely put it centuries ago, our life is what our thoughts make it. Prof. Mo Imam. By consciously choosing our thoughts, by applying these practical principles, clear thinking, decisive action, acceptance, shifting perspective, we genuinely can transform even the most challenging circumstances, turn them into opportunities for growth, for finding profound inner peace. Prof. Mo Imam. We all possess inner resources, resilience, clarity, far greater than we often realize. And this deep dive, I sincerely hope, has perhaps illuminated some pathways for you, our listener, to reclaim those resources in your own life, your own professional journey.
Absolutely.
And if you have found this deep dive valuable today, please do consider taking just a moment to rate and share the show with a colleague or a friend who you think might benefit. Your support really does help us continue bringing these kinds of insights to more listeners like you. And just to leave you with a final thought, a powerful truth to mull over. Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. So the question is, what strength are you willing to reclaim, starting today by choosing action and acceptance over that endless, draining anxiety? Something to reflect on, perhaps, and explore in your own life, starting now.